Soft piano music swells under a dimly lit frame, a close-up of Julie Andrews today, graceful yet reflective. Her hands rest gently in her lap, her eyes holding the warmth of decades in Hollywood spotlight. The world knows her as Mary Poppins, the voice that taught generations how to find joy in order, melody, and a spoonful of sugar. She is the woman who twirled across Austrian hills, who made the world believe in love that could conquer fear. But tonight, at 90 years old, the world hears a different kind of story, a confession no one ever expected from the woman who embodied purity itself. At 90, the narrator whispers, Britain's darling, the eternal governess of the screen, finally revealed something that left even her closest fans stunned. She named 7 actors she once wanted to sleep with. The music slows, a gentle, teasing rhythm. Quick flashes appear. Black and white headlines, flickering news tickers, social media posts filled with disbelief and laughter. Julie Andrews said what? Did Mary Poppins just confess her Hollywood crushes? Silhouettes of 7 men fade in behind her image, handsome, mysterious figures from a bygone era, their faces hidden, their identities unknown. Then, the narrator continues. Who were they? Why now? And what does it tell us, not just about Julie Andrews, but about the secret fantasies, untold affections, and quiet longings buried beneath Hollywood's golden lights? A soft smile crosses Julie's face in the montage, perhaps remembering the people who shared her youth, her career, her laughter. The screen fades to black as the narrator's voice deepens. Tonight, we uncover not only the names she chose, but the stories behind them. The moments that could have been, the glances that lingered too long, the hidden desires that even the most elegant women carry. This isn't gossip. It's humanity, wrapped in satin, framed by the spotlight, and whispered by a legend who finally decided to tell the truth. Julie Andrews was born in 1935 in Walton-on-Thames, England, a child of post-war dreams and raw, rare talent. Her voice, crystalline and commanding even at a young age, became her passport out of a difficult childhood. By her teens, she was performing on the London stage, already hailed as a prodigy whose range and pitch defied belief. What began as a child star's hopeful climb soon transformed into one of the most celebrated careers in entertainment history. When she crossed the Atlantic, Broadway took notice. In My Fair Lady and Camelot, Andrews became the embodiment of grace under spotlight. Polished, kind, every note pristine. And then came Mary Poppins in 1964. With a carpet bag and an umbrella that defied gravity, Julie didn't just play a role, she defined it. The world fell in love with her immaculate poise, her gentle humor, her perfection. 1 year later, The Sound of Music turned her into a cinematic saint. As Maria von Trapp, she wasn't just singing to the mountains, she was etching herself into history as the symbol of wholesome goodness, of a world still capable of innocence. For decades, her public image remained untouchable. She was the model of dignity, the refined English rose who embodied both discipline and compassion. Even when Hollywood grew darker, more scandalous, Julie Andrews seemed immune. There were no tabloid meltdowns, no salacious affairs. She was, in the public imagination, the last of the pure icons. That's why, when she reached 90 and suddenly made an unexpected, playful confession, saying she once wanted to sleep with 7 actors, the world gasped. Not in outrage, but in awe. For the first time, the woman who had lived behind impeccable manners revealed a spark of mischief, a streak of honesty that felt both human and thrillingly rebellious. The moment was said to have come from a modern media interview, a piece that spread like wildfire under the title At 90, Julie Andrews names the 7 actors she wanted to sleep with. It wasn't scandal, it was liberation. The revelation wasn't about lust or shock value. It was about memory, fantasy, and truth-telling from a woman who had seen it all. We may never know every name on her list. Hollywood keeps its secrets well, and Julie Andrews has always understood the art of subtlety. But that's where the magic lies. We can trace her life through her films, her friendships, her laughter, and find the threads that connect her to those 7 men. Some may have been co-stars, some long-time admirers, others fleeting crushes from another world. Tonight, we follow those threads. Through decades of music and motion, of private glances and public smiles, we'll try to imagine the love stories that could have been, the ones hidden behind the perfection, the laughter, and the legacy of a woman the world still calls practically perfect in every way. It began quietly, a light-hearted conversation on a British talk show celebrating Julie Andrews' 90th birthday. She was radiant as ever, seated across from a familiar host, her posture straight but her smile relaxed, the kind that carried both wisdom and mischief. The conversation flowed effortlessly, as it always did with her. Stories from Mary Poppins, memories of The Sound of Music, the laughter she shared with Walt Disney, the challenges of losing her singing voice after a botched surgery. Then, between the nostalgia and laughter, came the moment that no one could have scripted. The host leaned in with a teasing grin and asked, "Julie, you've worked with so many handsome leading men over the years. Be honest now, did you ever have any secret crushes?" For a heartbeat, she paused, then, with a sparkle in her eyes that defied her age, she said softly, "Oh, I had more than crushes. There were 7 actors I wanted to sleep with. Truly." The studio fell silent for a second, unsure whether to laugh or gasp. Julie Andrews, the eternal symbol of poise and purity, had just spoken words no one ever expected. Then came the laughter, the applause, the disbelief. She chuckled herself, covering her mouth with one elegant hand. "Oh dear," she added, "I've probably shocked you all, haven't I?" Within hours, the clip hit the internet. Headlines erupted across entertainment outlets. Julie Andrews confesses, 7 actors she wanted to sleep with. Mary Poppins' naughty secret list shocks fans. Talk shows replayed the segment, looping her line like it was a pop chorus. Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok flooded with reactions. Some were shocked, others delighted, and many simply couldn't believe that the woman who taught children to spell supercalifragilisticexpialidocious had a hidden list of Hollywood crushes. Memes appeared instantly, photos of Mary Poppins with sunglasses captioned, "When you finally tell the truth at 90. Another viral tweet read, "Julie Andrews didn't break character for decades, and now she's breaking the internet." Yet beneath the humor, something else took hold: fascination. Fans began speculating. Who were the 7? Cary Grant, Rock Hudson, Rex Harrison, Omar Sharif. Each theory spawned debates, threads, and video essays. People re-watched her films, hunting for clues in glances and smiles, in the chemistry that once filled screens across the world. Newspapers from London to Los Angeles ran playful analyses, trying to guess the identities. Columnists wrote that this was Julie Andrews' way of reminding the world that behind every perfectly enunciated word and every graceful bow, there lived a woman who had longings, curiosities, and a sense of humor about them. As the narrator, you pause in the film's voiceover and say, "For someone so universally adored, such a confession is more than gossip, it's a tiny crack in the porcelain facade of perfection." Through it, we glimpse not scandal, but humanity. Tonight, we're going to peer into that crack and see what lies beneath: the passions, the dreams, and the unspoken stories of Julie Andrews' golden years. If there was ever a man who embodied effortless charm, it was Cary Grant. Suave, composed, and devastatingly handsome, Grant was the kind of leading man who could make a room fall silent just by walking into it. For Julie Andrews, who came of age in an era when he was Hollywood's gold standard, Cary represented the impossible ideal: grace wrapped in mystery, sophistication cloaked in playfulness. Though the two never shared a screen, they shared a cinematic lineage. Both British, both refined, both symbols of elegance that Hollywood adored. Julie had often spoken about her admiration for actors who could command attention without saying a word. Cary Grant did exactly that. His mere presence was a masterclass in control and charisma. It isn't hard to imagine a young Julie, still performing on stage in London's West End, watching North by Northwest or To Catch a Thief and quietly swooning over the man who defined romance for an entire generation. His debonair style, his quick wit, the way he balanced danger and tenderness, it was everything her early life lacked and everything she would later project onto her roles. In interviews, she once described Grant as the kind of man who never needed to raise his voice to be heard. For someone like Julie, raised amid wartime England, taught to be disciplined and proper, that quiet confidence must have been magnetic. If she ever met him at an industry gala or a charity event, and there are whispers that they did, it's easy to picture the mutual respect between two icons of British poise. Perhaps there was a moment, a shared laugh, a look, that lingered longer than it should have. Grant's appeal wasn't merely physical. He represented an ideal of safety and allure, a man who could be both gentleman and danger. In Julie's world of careful control and emotional restraint, that duality must have stirred something deep. And so, when she named him decades later among the seven, it wasn't simply about desire. It was about nostalgia, for the era when romance was cinematic, when glances spoke louder than words. For Julie Andrews, Cary Grant wasn't just a fantasy. He was the elegant mirror of everything she and Hollywood once believed love should look like. But the next name on her list, far younger, far wilder, revealed a different side of her imagination altogether. There was something almost poetic about Julie Andrews and Rock Hudson, two stars of impossible warmth and grace, bound by the same industry that demanded perfection. They did, in fact, know each other. In 1982, they co-starred in Darling Lily, a wartime romance that placed them in one of Hollywood's most delicate pairings. On screen, their chemistry was undeniable, sweet, teasing, filled with that restrained sensuality of the late studio era. But what neither of them could have spoken about then were the invisible walls around their personal lives. Rock Hudson, adored by millions as the ultimate romantic lead, lived a private truth that Hollywood forced him to hide, his sexuality. Julie, ever the epitome of grace, would later recall how kind, shy, and deeply human he was. In interviews years after his death, she described him as one of the most beautiful souls I ever met. It's easy to imagine why she might include him on such a list, not out of lust, but affection. He was the impossible man, the friend you loved but could never truly have. Their friendship was filled with playful intimacy. She once said that between takes, Rock would whisper little jokes that made her laugh mid-scene. There was a deep tenderness between them, one that transcended attraction. In the tapestry of her confession, Rock Hudson symbolizes compassion, the reminder that love, in all its forms, doesn't need to be consummated to be real. If Cary Grant was the fantasy of elegance, Rock Hudson was the fantasy of connection. Two lonely hearts in a golden cage. When she spoke of him decades later, her eyes glistened. "If I'd known everything then that I know now," she said once, "I would have hugged him tighter." Julie Andrews met Omar Sharif at the height of his fame, the dashing Egyptian star who had conquered Hollywood through Lawrence of Arabia and Dr. Zhivago. Sharif was everything her British upbringing had warned her against: fiery, flirtatious, and irresistibly mysterious. They never made a film together, but their paths crossed at several international galas in the 1960s. At one, Sharif was said to have kissed her hand and joked, "If I'd met you first, the Sound of Music might have had a different ending." Julie laughed, but those who saw it swore she blushed. To her, Sharif embodied the thrill of the unknown, passion without pretense. He was a man of intellect, fluent in multiple languages, a gambler, a romantic, a poet of movement. Julie, whose life had always been defined by precision and discipline, found in him a symbol of freedom. When she named him, perhaps she was thinking of the kind of love that never fits into tidy musicals. Love that's unpredictable, tempestuous, and unforgettable. Sharif was a reminder that even the most well-mannered woman harbors a secret appetite for chaos. If Cary Grant was charm and Rock Hudson was tenderness, Omar Sharif was the forbidden storm, the man you could never tame and would never forget. No list of Hollywood fantasies could be complete without Paul Newman. His eyes alone could undo the world. Julie Andrews met him a few times at award shows during the 1960s. She, the refined English rose; he, the all-American icon with rebellion simmering beneath his calm. Newman represented everything Julie's career often denied her: sensuality, spontaneity, the rawness of human imperfection. He was married to Joanne Woodward in one of Hollywood's most admired unions, yet even from afar, he captured the imagination of women everywhere, including Julie's, perhaps. She once mentioned him in passing, calling him the definition of decency and devastating good looks. The respect in her tone hinted at something deeper: admiration not just for his talent, but for the quiet moral strength he carried through fame. In her fantasy, one could imagine her sharing an intimate dinner with Newman, their laughter echoing through a dimly lit restaurant, their hands almost touching across the table. It's not about betrayal or scandal, it's about longing for a connection that feels both safe and electric. Newman, in her mythology, stands for the beauty of goodness, the idea that desire and integrity can coexist. For a woman who spent decades playing the good girl, that fantasy must have been especially precious. Rex Harrison was more than a co-star, he was a chapter in Julie Andrews' own story. He starred opposite her in My Fair Lady on stage before Audrey Hepburn took the film role, and it was Harrison who helped shape her early confidence as a performer. He was older, commanding, and deliciously arrogant, traits that could easily frustrate and fascinate in equal measure. Offstage, though, he had a wicked sense of humor and a certain vulnerability that few saw. Julie admired his intellect and precision, though there was always an undercurrent of tension between them. Perhaps born of admiration, perhaps something subtler. Including him on her list might not have been about attraction in the traditional sense. It was about power, the kind of fascination that comes when a young woman learns from a man who intimidates her and inspires her all at once. For Julie, Rex Harrison represented transformation, the teacher figure who awakened something within the pupil. Their connection, though never romantic, might have burned brightly in her imagination, a dance between mentorship and temptation. If Julie Andrews' image was that of control, Steve McQueen was the living embodiment of chaos. The king of cool, a man who lived fast, loved fiercely, and feared nothing, everything Julie was not. They moved in entirely different circles, yet his energy fascinated her. She once said in an interview that she admired actors who lived fully, dangerously, who were unafraid of who they were. It's easy to picture McQueen in that light, roaring through Hollywood on his motorcycle, leather jacket glinting, a cigarette dangling from his lips. For Julie, McQueen symbolized rebellion, the road not taken. He was rough edges where she was Polish, adrenaline where she was melody. To imagine the two of them together is to imagine the collision of order and anarchy. If she ever dreamed of him, it wasn't for love, it was to borrow his freedom, to feel for a moment what it might be like to live without restraint. In that sense, Steve McQueen represents Julie's inner daredevil, the part of her that longed to leap, if only once, before returning to her stage of grace. And then there was Richard Burton, the final, and perhaps most dangerous name. Brilliant, tortured, magnetic. His Welsh voice could turn poetry into seduction, his gaze burned through the screen. Julie and Burton crossed paths at award ceremonies, their lives orbiting the same golden sphere. He was, for her, a paradox, a man who could love deeply and destroy everything in the same breath. He fascinated her because he represented risk, the kind of emotional intensity that could consume a person whole. For a woman as careful and measured as Julie Andrews, Burton would have been irresistible in theory and terrifying in practice. When she named him, perhaps it was with a wistful smile, the acknowledgement of a man who embodied every storm she never allowed herself to enter. In Burton, she saw what passion looked like when unrestrained, what art sounded like when it bled. And so, her list of 7 wasn't a scandal, it was a confession of humanity. Each man a mirror, each name a reflection of who she was at different moments. The dreamer, the friend, the student, the rebel, the believer in love. When Julie Andrews named the 7 men she once wanted to sleep with, she wasn't being scandalous, she was being human. For 9 decades, she'd been the world's image of composure, the perfect lady, the gentle teacher, the moral compass of every film she touched. But in that moment, she did something extraordinary. She reclaimed her right to be real. At 90, such a revelation wasn't about lust, it was about memory. About acknowledging that desire, in all its forms, never truly leaves us. The body may age, but the imagination doesn't. By voicing those names, she was asserting that the inner life of a woman, her fantasies and longings, deserved to exist publicly without shame. Throughout her career, Hollywood built Julie Andrews into a monument of purity. She was the standard of grace, the good woman archetype that audiences leaned on to feel safe. And yet, beneath that halo, there lived a person with humor, curiosity, and private what-ifs. When she confessed her crushes, she shattered a quiet taboo, that older women, especially icons, are not supposed to talk about wanting anyone. Society had long told them that the age of longing must end, that maturity must mean silence. Julie, with a single sentence, broke that illusion. Perhaps part of her knew the reaction it would cause, the viral storm, the playful shock. Maybe she enjoyed it. But deeper still, it was a statement of freedom. At 90, There is no longer a career to protect or image to maintain. There is only truth, unfiltered and tender. Her confession joins a lineage of other late-life admissions, like Betty White's flirtatious humor or Jane Fonda's candid reflections on desire and intimacy in old age. These women, through laughter and honesty, remind the world that longing is not youth's monopoly. For Julie, fantasy was never betrayal, it was celebration. A nod to the men who inspired her, stirred her imagination, and reflected pieces of her own journey. Each name was a metaphor, for elegance, for rebellion, for kindness, for mystery. And perhaps that's the real beauty of her confession. It wasn't just about 7 men. It was about 7 versions of herself, the dreamer, the artist, the woman who lived her life through song but never stopped dreaming in silence. By saying it aloud, she wasn't tarnishing her legend. She was rewriting it, reminding us that perfection is not the absence of desire, but the courage to feel it without shame. The aftermath of Julie Andrews' revelation was exactly what one might expect in the digital age, an explosion of fascination, laughter, and warmth. Fans filled social media with affection, not outrage. Even Mary Poppins has crushes, one user wrote. She's one of us. Others called it her most human moment, a reminder that behind every cinematic icon is a woman who once sat in the dark, dreaming of the same screen gods as everyone else. Some critics tried to spin it as a publicity stunt, a cheeky way to keep her name trending in a crowded media world. But those who truly understood Julie knew better. There was no calculation here, no marketing trick. There was simply honesty, the kind that only arrives when a person has lived long enough to stop caring what others think. She never apologized or clarified the statement. She didn't need to. When asked later in an interview if she regretted saying too much, she smiled and said, "At my age, what's left to lose?" The moment faded from the headlines in a few days, as all viral stories do. But something lingered. It became a quiet footnote in her legend, a small act of rebellion that made her feel even more alive to her fans. In her vast legacy of music, film, and grace, this confession stands as a whisper of truth, that even angels have desires, and that the woman who gave the world its most proper characters could still surprise us with her humanity. And so, when future generations look back on Julie Andrews, not just as Mary Poppins or Maria von Trapp, but as the woman behind the smile, they'll remember that moment when she laughed, confessed, and reminded the world that age can soften everything but the heart. And so, we arrive at the quiet heart of it all, the wonder that a woman once celebrated for her purity, for her unshakable grace and composure, chose, at 90, to speak openly of desire. Julie Andrews' confession wasn't a scandal. It was a revelation, that even the gentlest souls have private fires that never fade. For decades, she sang of hope, of innocence, of goodness. But this moment, this tender, playful truth, reminded the world that longing doesn't contradict virtue. It completes it. To name our desires is not to destroy who we are. It's to show that we are still alive beneath the calm exterior. So ask yourself, if you were 90, who would you name? What memories, what faces, what half-forgotten dreams would you dare to speak aloud? What does it mean to finally admit longing in public, without shame, without apology? As the music swells, we see her one last time. Julie Andrews, older now, smiling softly, eyes sparkling with humor and grace. And the narrator whispers the final truth. In the end, naming desire is not about scandal. It's about reclaiming the self, the imagination, and the right to live, fully, beautifully, and unafraid.